You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Brine, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. For as long as I can remember, the problem of what do you do with packaging that agricultural products come in, where do you put them, how do you get rid of them, how do you dispose of them properly, has been an issue on farms. If you go back far enough to when my grandfather was farming, much of the product that we got was either brought in bulk or came in something like a jute sack. And at that time, those were always useful somewhere on farm. We didn't have the same issues at that point. But if you go into the 60s, when we started getting into products that were used as pesticides and herbicides, suddenly we had containers on farms that nobody really knew what to do with. At that point, many of them ended up in a landfill or got burnt. Over the years, we have developed some different programs to try and get rid of that problem, that we don't see that happening, certainly not to that same extent that we did back 50 or 60 years ago. Today, we're talking with Kim Timmer. Kim is the manager of Stakeholder Relations with Clean Farms, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's being done to solve some of these problems. Kim, welcome to the Back 40.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kim, what is Clean Farms?
Clean Farms is what we call an industry stewardship organization, and we focus on the proper management of agricultural plastics and packaging, like our name says. That's quite a mouthful, so I'll dissect that just a little bit further. Just like you mentioned, farmers use a variety of plastics that are really important parts of their farming operations. Plastics, they deliver inputs to farm, they provide for ideal growing conditions, and they really help protect feed. When you work in agriculture, there's this innate commitment or pull towards good stewardship. So taking care of the land, making sure that it's in a better state for the next generation. In our context, this means that there's just a really strong desire to make sure plastics and packaging are managed properly when their useful life is over. So that's where Clean Farms, so myself and my 15 colleagues really come in. So we work with a variety of partners, and essentially what we do is we help farmers recycle these plastics. We do that both here in Ontario as well as across Canada. We don't work alone. We work with a variety of partners, whether it's industry, whether it's grower groups, and it's all really about making sure that these plastics find the right home once the farmer is done with them.
So what's your role with Clean Farms?
So as manager of stakeholder relationship, I often tell people that there's two things. I work with extremely smart, talented, and dedicated individuals, but the programs that we offer also impact extremely smart, talented, and dedicated individuals. And so I really have the privilege of ensuring that our team is hearing from these external stakeholders. Industry is an extremely important stakeholder to us, so I spend a lot of time with industry. Right now, I do a lot of work with government officials. There is an even stronger regulatory component to the work that we're doing, in particular outside of Ontario. And so we undergo some exercises just to make sure that our program and therefore our members meet regulatory obligations. But I'm also leading a really exciting new project for Clean Farms. It's called Building a Zero Plastic Waste Strategy for Agriculture. For the first time, we tapped into some federal funding, so through Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and we're using this to deliver pilots in various parts of the country to make sure everyone has access to up-to-date information, just because we know that whether you work in agriculture or any other sector, right now, people have higher expectations about how plastic needs to be managed. They're looking for leadership, and that's where agriculture can really fit in.
So how did you get involved with this?
So when I get asked that question, I like to tell people it's really the good people and it's the great challenges that got me in here. And it's actually what really kept me in here. I'm actually a kid from Scarborough, which is a suburb of Toronto. I was born in Fredericton, spent some time in Thunder Bay, but really all I know and all I grew up with was Toronto, which makes working in agriculture a little bit of a question mark. My degree is actually in nutrition and sociology. Right out of school, I was working in the pharmaceutical field, so in marketing and communications and customer service. I then got the opportunity to get started in pesticide industry, really at the trade association level. I actually started with CropLife Canada, which is the trade association that represents the plant science industry. And some folks might question the hop from pharmaceuticals to pesticides, but it was actually quite seamless. Both sectors really deliver innovations to either treat and protect, whether it's humans or a plant. They face similar challenges. And so as soon as I got in there, I got to know the really great people that make up the farming industry. I'm sure you're going to agree with me. As long as you're open to learning, there's always someone, a farmer, somebody who's willing to teach you. So then I got the opportunity to hop again, and now I'm really focused on a company and working with people who are interested in innovations in packaging and end-of-life management. And what's great now is that really our team is helping to solve problems that are bigger than one company or one farm or one province. And that's what's really keeping me energized every day to come to work.
I mentioned in my preamble there that if you go back far enough, we didn't have the major issue with the pesticides and herbicides. But when my father started using those back in the 60s there, we didn't know very much about what do you do with this. We understood a little bit about the chemistry of the product itself, but a lot of those containers ended up in landfill sites, sometimes rinsed out properly, sometimes not. And then people started saying, well, triple rinse them and then get rid of them. And a lot of landfills said, well, we don't want them. And it became a huge problem at that point. And what do you do with a whole bunch of spray containers that nobody wants to have? Clean Farms really is looking to solve a lot of those problems.
What's almost funny is the last time I was really at an in-person event, so this goes back to probably December of 2019, I actually met two of the gentlemen who were instrumental in starting the container recycling program in Ontario in 1989. So think about that. This goes back 30 years. I don't know if blue box or recycling was even a common term. What I think really got everything started in this industry was just a lot of leadership and a lot of collaboration amongst various partners to come up with a solution. Because again, there's that innate desire to keep the farm healthier for future generations. And so you're going to hear me talk a lot about industry, and that's because there's a lot of industry leadership in this area. When you look at Clean Farms and when you look at that container recycling program, it's actually the companies that are supplying farmers with those innovations who are extremely committed to Clean Farms. And they actually finance the programs that we offer, and they've laid the foundation for really any super expansion. And they did that back in 1989, before circular economy was even a term. And then when you look at Ontario specifically, what I'm so proud of and what other people are so proud of is the fact that the ag retail network, so the folks that are selling these inputs to farmers, really got on board right away. And when you look at the container recycling program, that is all managed within industry. So within the people that are actually using those products, we're not pulling on municipal resources. And as an organization, let me tell you, that makes our job so much easier. So it's whoever is involved with supplying that product to a farmer and the farmer themselves. They're actually really taking responsibility for those products. So the program's evolved over the years, and I don't even know back in 1989 if they would have even imagined that the plastics from those containers actually have value. It actually goes into a new product, and most of it actually goes into farm drainage tile, which, as you probably know, is used to manage drainage on farms, and it also keeps basements dry. But it's really nice to see that container that was a problem years and years ago is actually a resource that goes into a new product.
I would say probably they didn't expect that it would take off like this. Certainly, if you go back to mid to late 80s, we were just starting to hear a lot about the environment and what we were going to do with it. We had a couple of situations where we had pesticides end up in drinking water, and it really came to the forefront. And if you've got to manage the pesticide, then you obviously have to do something with those containers as well. You mentioned and touched briefly on this, that this is industry partners that are actually funding this. How does Clean Farms get their funding from this? Now, obviously, some of these programs are funded through the industry. How does Clean Farms get their funding in order to operate?
So we have what we call a membership structure. Anybody that sells a pesticide into the market has the opportunity to be part of Clean Farms, and they actually have a financial commitment to us. And it's based on the number of containers, for example, that they sell into a marketplace. So every container of product that's sold into the marketplace, there's a levy attached to it. That comes to Clean Farms. And so we're responsible for managing the containers when the farmer is done with them. So I talk a lot about that financial commitment. If there's any policy wonks listening in, they'll be interested to know that this is all done really on a voluntary basis for the most part. So these are just industries that are used to working together, that have come together and said, we're going to put the appropriate financing in place to have an organization like Clean Farms run the program. And it's not just that. There's more leadership that goes into building these programs. So just this week, we had our board meeting. We have a board meeting of 12 industry leaders from across Canada. And of course, we did the meeting by Zoom. I was looking around the virtual table, and I'm counting 12 board members, 4 hours for a meeting. Think of the time it took for them to prepare for that meeting. And this is all, at first I would say on top of their day jobs, but it's really incredible that end-of-life stewardship is not something on the side of their desk. It's a critical part of their business operations. We're not just talking about it with this product line. We're actually making the financial commitment to get it done. I think that's a really amazing thing about this industry, and I think everybody should really be proud of it.
And I would think that if they're concerned about, as you put it, the end of life cycle here, they're also going to be thinking about that when they're developing the packaging in the first place.
That's one of the really interesting, I want to say new developments, but that's not fair about this industry. They've always been thinking about, what the packaging is. They're always helping us promote this program, and they're thinking further along. So I now know companies are doing a better job of not just talking about packaging, but they're talking about other, developments in this industry. So depending on the company that you talk to and the product line, some people will be really interested to know that in some product lines, up to 90% of that product is delivered to farm either in bulk or in reusable containers. And so it's not just about recycling, it's about good management of that packaging. So reuse where possible, delivering in bulk containers where possible.
I remember when I used to use corn rootworm pesticide, it used to come in bags, and it was nasty, nasty stuff to work with. You had to have a mask on, you needed gloves, you need proper coveralls, and it was still really nasty to work with. And then they came along with their lock and load containers, which was for the time really novel. That's a reusable container. And you put that directly onto the planter box and just gave it a quarter turn and snapped it into place, and it filled. And you never had any of that come out into the atmosphere at all. It's innovations like that that have led to, as you say, 90% of the product showing up on farm in something that's reusable, which ultimately is much, much better for the environment.
And an interesting note, you did mention bags, and I've talked so much about containers because that really is our signature program. But I feel like there's so much care and concern in this industry. Is the industry wasn't happy just to do containers. And actually, it was in 2016 that we started to offer an empty seed and pesticide bag collection program here in Ontario. It's actually mirrored off of a program that's been available to the East in PEI since 2006 when we were helping potato farmers manage their fungicide bags. But that came to Ontario in 2016, again, completely voluntary basis, no government involvement. And those same 200 ag retailers, and now we've got seed dealers, are giving us time and they're giving us space to collect these empty bags. So again, that's just another example of a product. It's not going to municipal landfills. It's not being stored somewhere on the farm. It's industry really taking a proactive stance to make sure these products are managed.
Now, you don't necessarily manage the depots where these are returned to. Some of these, or many of these depots, go back to the original distributor of the product. Am I correct? Or how does that work?
So our collection programs operate on a return to the point of purchase sort of system. So wherever the farmer has bought their product from, that's where they return their empty jugs or their empty bags. And again, from the perspective of someone running a program, it's just so refreshing to work with companies that already know the product. They know all of the safety in the system. It makes our job so much easier. And there's also that personal connection. So each time the farmer goes to his ag retailer, he's got this reminder that this is the place where he can bring his or her empties.
Yeah, it's good for business. That's where I bought it from. That's where I can get rid of, I can dispose of this.
Yeah.
I'm sure for some of our listeners that aren't involved in the ag industry, the idea of taking your recyclables back to where you bought them from is somewhat bizarre. I can't even imagine taking the plastic and the cardboard that we buy in the grocery store, taking it back there and saying, here, you take this. And yet the agricultural industry has done that. That's the model that they use.
They've always done it, and they always do it with a smile. Agriculture is all about relationships and responsibility, and this ties right into that.
Do you like what you're hearing from the Back 40? We'd like to hear from you. Send us an email with your comments and thoughts to theback40@trilliummutual.com or follow us on social media @Trillium Mutual. What other sort of programs do you run? We've talked about pesticides, we've talked about bags.
Yeah.
What other types of programs do you have either in Ontario or across Canada?
One of the programs that we do offer, I call it on a permanent basis. So this is a program that for us is funded by industry and it's offered year over year. And that would be our unwanted or obsolete pesticide and older expired animal health medication collection program. This program is offered once every 3 years in each region, so a bit different from the bag or the container collections, which are offered year over year. In the event that a farmer is cleaning out a shed or technologies have changed, or for whatever reason he or she has a product that doesn't have a use anymore, this program ensures that they have a place to take them. So once again, we partner with the ag retail sector. And what they do is they allow one of our hazardous waste suppliers to set up at one of their locations for a single day event. A farmer drops off his or her old product. What's great about it, the product doesn't even touch the ground. It goes right into a Gaylord container, right into a truck, and rearrange for it to be managed really through high temperature incineration at a licensed facility. So really, when it comes to crop protection, there's so much stewardship in the system. Some of our newer programs have a little bit of a different focus. So just this summer, we started to actually offer a pilot program for baler twine, for silage bags, bunker covers, bale wrap in the Bruce County region. This is one of a series of 6 pilots that are available throughout Canada for the next 3 years. So when you look at the Bruce County region, you've got a really strong and engaged group of dairy farmers. And you've also got really, really keen individuals at the municipal level who want to make a difference. So it was really the ideal partnership for Clean Farms. We've got 4 collection sites in the region. Farmers are asked to prepare these materials for recycling, so very different from containers or bags. What we're asking them to do is make sure that the product is as clean as possible. And then they're asked to drop off their materials. They're asked to keep them separately. So twine in one bag, bale wrap in one bag, silage tied up or in another bag, and they're asked to drop them off at a collection site. What's even more interesting is we have a few farmers in the area who are working with us to test out some on-farm presses or compactors. And these compactors, it's a really neat innovation coming out of Prince Edward County. There's a beef farmer called Lynn Levitt who started making these presses years ago, and it is a great partner to the industry. But these presses, they're often used on farm, and they really help farmers store their plastics on farm prior to collection. It compacts the plastic. You get a really nice tight bale, keeps the plastic cleaner. It reduces the amount of space you need to store these ag plastics. These are some of the innovations that we're testing out in Bruce County right now. Again, the project just got off the ground in the summer, but what we learn there can potentially be applied to other regions where, again, you've got engaged farmers, you've got interested folks on municipal councils. So what we learn there can potentially be applied elsewhere.
Our temporary storage that we've used where we wrap bales and silage bags and that sort of thing, I mean, that's great for putting extra product on farm and storing it. Does a really good job, but it's always been an issue. What do you do with the plastic when you're done with it? And this is going to help solve some of that problems, because I know you often see on farms, you'll see bale wrap is a common one. There's a spot there where they've got bale wrap, and it's always been an issue to how you dispose of that rather than just straight into a landfill site.
The neat thing, again, is I'll say that probably in the last 2 to 3 years, there's so much of a desire from farmers to get involved and try to find a solution to that. Our one real piece of advice is you do have to try to keep the plastic as clean as possible. you know what a challenge that is.
It's huge.
There's clean within the context of a house, and then there's clean within the context of agriculture and Mother Nature and all of that. That's why it's so important when we do programs is we start small. We work with a very small region. We try to work out those kinks, and then we expand from there.
When you start talking about new programs, where does most of your ideas come from? Does that come from the farming community? Does it come from industry? Do you develop them yourselves? Where do you normally see those ideas come from?
A variety of sources. I think that the first thing that you need whenever you're looking at a program is you need baseline information. You need almost a state of the industry of what's going on in a particular region. And so earlier this year, Clean Farms actually released a national ag waste study. And what this did is we identified and we quantified the types of ag plastics in use in each region. And no surprise to those in the farming community, what's being used in Saskatchewan is very different than what's being used in Ontario. So now we have that baseline data. The other thing that factors into the equation is actually end markets. So just an interesting tidbit about Clean Farms and the way we think. When we look at plastic, whether it's those containers we collect, whether it's bale wrap, we see a commodity, right? This isn't waste. This is a commodity. And so we're always thinking about finding an end market for that plastic. So we've done some work where we've analyzed end markets that are available in North America. So that goes into the equation. Then the fun part begins. And that's where we try to find a way to collect this material in a format that recyclers can actually use. And that's where the pilot projects come in. That's where the work happens in Bruce County. You do really have to take a slow and steady approach to program development. I'll give you an example from out west. In Saskatchewan, they use a product called grain bags. Anybody who's driven through the prairies has seen them. It's a single-use 300-pound plastic bag, used to store grain before it goes to the elevator. Again, this is a 300-pound bag of plastic. In Saskatchewan, they piloted programs for collecting these materials for about 6 or 7 years. Clean Farms got involved in 2018, where they transitioned that to a permanent industry-funded program. Our first year of collection, we collected 1,200 tons of grain bags. We've tripled it in 3 years. So you start small, you build a model that works, and then this is agriculture, right? Everybody wants to do the right thing, so you'll always see your collections increase over time once you've figured out the way to collect it.
And all of that's been collected would have previously ended up in a landfill site?
Yeah, or on-farm storage. So now that material goes into a recycling facility either in Alberta or in Arkansas, of all places, and it's used to make new contractor bags. Some of it does go into plastic lumber and that type of thing, but the bulk of it goes into really a useful product, plastic bags that are used again.
That's the ultimate challenge, isn't it? And we hear about that with consumer waste on a fairly regular basis, where we have all sorts of recyclables that are collected and come back again, and they end up in a landfill site because there's no end user for those, not economical, or just simply they're overrun. They've got lots to start with.
Yeah. And so I think, again, that's where Clean Farms is so lucky. We are so focused. I'm really grateful that I have access to recycling services at my home. I'm also grateful I'm not involved in working through that. Clean Farms works in a very specialized space. We only collect materials that are homogeneous. So all of our containers are the same material. It's high density polyethylene. It's all one material. That makes finding an end market a little bit easier because we have a real consistent, high quality product, thanks to those retailers, thanks to those farmers, that we can offer to recyclers.
What sort of projects do you see coming down the line in the future for Clean Farms? What might be happening next?
So one of the things I always say to people is, it's always exciting to work in agriculture. It's always exciting. Things are always changing. This is a really exciting time to actually work in recycling. And part of that is because there's so many industry commitments. There's so many government commitments really aimed at improving the way that packaging and plastics are managed. And so for Clean Farms, you and I have talked a fair bit about recycling and recovering plastics, but there's also more focus on just more innovative packaging in general. So we've actually formed a sustainable packaging committee, and we're going to take a really inside look at the products and packaging that the industry is using. we're going to ask ourselves, are there problematic plastics? Can those be replaced? The other thing that I'm really excited to see is where this drive for more recycled content is going to go. Governments are starting to really push for product manufacturers to incorporate more recycled content into their product. We're asking ourselves, is that possible to do that for the containers used in our industry? So interesting fact is our counterparts in Brazil, they actually use plastic collected through a very similar container recycling program. It is actually reused in some cases in new pesticide containers. And so for us, that's almost the holy grail of circularity. And it's exciting for Clean Farms because our container recycling program, it's been available for 30 years. We have excellent feedstock that we could offer to a container manufacturer if he or she was interested in incorporating more recycled content in the product. And there are so many external forces and expectations that we'd really like to see if something like that could work out in North America. I think you're going to hear much more innovation in packaging. You and I talked about sort of how companies, they've been using reusable packaging or they've been delivering in bulk to farms for many years. I hope that some of those companies are going to speak up a little bit more and tell those stories about reuse a little bit more in the industry.
That's something when you talk about reusing the plastic in order to make new containers there, it's always been an issue of pesticide container is by nature contaminated. As soon as you put the product into it, how do you rinse that out, make sure it's clean so that somebody could use it again? The idea of we'll shred it and we'll just make it over again. That's something that, as you say, it's very circular and you're using the same product over and over. How much can you include in that? Can you make these 100% out of recycled containers, or do you have to add some new material in for it?
You probably have to add some new material. Most governments are asking folks to aim for 20 to 30% recycled content. When I think about our counterparts in Brazil, they're making these pesticide containers that they're made with, they say, upwards of 80% recycled content, of which 20% is likely from recycled plastic containers.
Still, 80% recycled is a huge number.
Yeah.
Where we're talking 20% would be really nice. When you've got 80%, even if it's not entirely out of the pesticide industry containers, it certainly does make a difference to what do you do with that plastic. We all know it's a problem in our environment.
Yeah. And you know what? I'd flip it on the side and I say it's really just a challenge. It's a challenge to the industry, but there's so much momentum right now that the timing is right for folks to really drill down and solve that problem.
You speak with a lot of passion about this. What is it that drives you for this? What's your personal view of this? Why is it that you do what you do?
There's a couple of reasons, and I mentioned that it's good challenges and great people that have just brought me into this industry. I'll say this again, I'm a kid from Scarborough, and I was just adopted by this industry. I'm just amazed at the commitment that farmers have to their land and to everything that they do. I feel like saying I don't quite have the guts to be a farmer, but I can definitely play a strong supporting role. And so that's what really keeps me here. This next little tidbit is going to make you laugh. I bought my first home years ago on the west end of Toronto. And what was unique about my home is when I got to the backyard and I looked out over the patio, I saw a ski hill. And it's actually the only ski hill in Toronto. And I was so very proud of myself. But whenever the wind shifted a certain way, you got a very interesting smell in the backyard. And I later learned that actually used to be a landfill site. And that ski hill, left over from the landfill. So once that happened, that really just reassured me that not only my passion from the environment, I'm an outdoorsy person, but whatever I could do to really help conserve landfill space would be a good thing.
We've certainly found out over the last number of years that landfills are not really welcome in very many spots. So anything we can do to prolong the ones that we've got and reduce the amount that ends up in them is certainly going to be welcome. How do people find out more about Clean Farms and the projects and programs that they offer?
In the absence of trade shows, which I really miss those, that's always an opportunity to chat with a member of our team. But we always direct people to our website, cleanfarms.ca. There's lots of resources there. Whether you're interested in, I'll say, the softer side of Clean Farms, or if you need to find out where the closest collection site is to you, that's your one-stop shop.
That's awesome. It's been great talking to you today. I think that this is a topic that is not going away anytime soon. We're certainly going to hear more and more about it as many of us try and figure out what do we do with a lot of these plastics. So thank you very much for speaking with us today.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks, Mike.
You've been listening to The Back 40, brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Join us next time when we'll be talking about the Outstanding Young Farmers Program here in Ontario. Our guest will be the chair of the Outstanding Young Farmers Program, Amy Cronin. That's next time on The Back 40. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together, one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe.